Today we're in 36, Psalms 36, another psalm where he's talking about the transgressions of the wicked. He's making his point that we're always trying to tell the wicked from the righteous. We're trying to extol and encourage the righteous to stick with it, to have faith in the Lord, that things will go their way, that there is a God who's on their side. And so what happens is the transgression of the wicked saith to his heart that there's no fear of God before his eyes. The wicked are not afraid of God. And that's the interesting thing here. It's like they know what God is saying, but they're just not afraid of him. For he flattered himself with his own eyes unto his iniquities to be found hateful. He's flattering himself. This is the he here is not God. The he here is the wicked. And we're talking about the wicked. Thy mercy, O Lord, is in the heavens, and thy faithfulness reaches unto the clouds. The righteousness is like the great mountains. Thy judgments are like a great deep. He's talking how excellent is the loving kindness, O God, that you have for your children, for the righteous. They that put their trust under the shadow of thy wings. The idea of he has his wings open, and you can trust those wings to take care of you and to provide for you. For with thee is the fountain of life. In thy light shall we see light. He is a God of light. O continue thy loving kindness unto them that know thee, and thy righteousness to the upright of heart. And he ends with, there are the workers of iniquity fallen. They are cast down, and they shall not be able to rise. So when we think that the wicked are going to rule, they're going to reign forever, they're always going to have their way, and that's not the way it's going to be. This is a psalm of reminder of the goodness of God and the firmness of God and what's going on, but he will judge the wicked. Going back to, we're looking at Exodus 21 and 22. We begin with some of the laws here, and this is where people kind of bog down. The narrative stopped, all the action stops. Everything stops at Sinai for chapter after chapter. And this and through Leviticus is technically where people start to bog down. I won't go through every little technicality here. That's for your own research. It bears a lot of fruit. There is a reason. God tells us everything for a reason. This is stuff that we need to know. Remember, he's setting a nation up from scratch. They have no blueprint. They have no way of doing things. How do they treat one another? What are the laws? What can I do and not do? Where are my rights? Where are my brother's rights? What happens if there's conflicts? What can I do? What can I not do? In fact, we've seen that they've worried Moses with all of these things. And Jethro gave him the idea of breaking it down to thousands, hundreds, 50s, and 10s. And imagine that everybody brings you the same, I'm mad at my brother, or what if I wanted to sleep with that guy's wife, or this guy slept with my wife, or this guy stole from me. I found an ox, it's mine, no, it's mine. I mean, all these little petty things going back and forth. It would be really starting to wear him down. Now we're starting to codify the law. The good thing about this is we are codifying the law from here on. We're giving values. We're creating nations. We're creating laws. And some of the things that we're talking about for our 21st century ears is kind of difficult. We have a hard time. There are people who will misread this and say, well, God is back this, or God is okay with that. Let's also remember that he had to create certain laws to fit within the culture of the day. And then as people progressed, those laws would become more fine-tuned. I mean, we have certain laws that were in effect in the 17 and 1800s that we don't have today because man progresses. We're not changing the laws to just move up and work with the culture more. There was no law against internet privacy 50 years ago because there was no internet. You get the idea how laws change, but the values stay the same. The ideals of property, the ideals of fiduciary responsibility, the ideals of relationship stay the same. The laws are just changed to meet the cultural demands, but the root of the laws stay the same. The laws of fairness, the laws of justice, the laws of equity, the laws of property. So we see here that he starts with the judgments, and he talks about buying a Hebrew servant, and this is where a lot of people yell slavery. There's slavery in the Bible. Well, I've read over 21 and 22, and instead of me trying to twist it into our minds, I'm going to let it say what it says. First of all, the word is servant, not slave. The word slave was in no Bibles before 1881. It was added by the guys who did the Revised Standard. They added it very poorly. It's the poor choice of words. A slave is someone who is in a place they cannot get out of. They are hopelessly trapped. We're going to see that this servant, will serve you for 6 years, and in the 7th years, he may go free for nothing. In other words, this is more of an employee-employer relationship. We see this also in the New Testament. We call master and slave, master and servant. In fact, the word slave is only really used twice in the Bible, in the King James Bible. Once, it's when Israel was in Babylon because they could not get out. They were trapped there. They could not move. They were going to be there. There's also talking about the existence of slaves in the end time in the book of Revelation, that people owned slaves. They did not have servants. There was slavery, full-born slavery in the end times. Man enslaves man. God, through Christ, is here to free man, to set the captives free. Now, if you're free, but you're in a situation where you're having to rely on somebody else because you don't own land, you don't own property, you don't have a business, so yeah, you're going to have to be another man's servant. But here he sets it up to where the powerful will take care of the powerless. We're going to see where, for example, you're just not indentured forever. You can only have a servant for 6 years, then he has to decide on whether he wants to stay or go. We'll see where they talks about that in a minute, where if he wants to stay with the household, he likes where he's at, he wants to stick with this, then he can become a servant. When we talk about that, if he came in with nothing, he goes out with nothing. If he's married, this is where it sounds bad, that the woman that you marry and the kids stay with the master. But let's think about this. This man has nothing. He has no way of providing for them. These masters, these powerful people also, as we will later see when we look at Ruth and Boaz, they create small communities. They have their own security. They have their own economy. They provide for themselves. They provide themselves olive oil and cattle and sheep and fig trees and grapes. They take care of their sustenance. You may have someone there that's more of a medical person. You may have someone there that runs a small school to educate the children. You may have someone there who's also good with buying and selling, so he can go out into the marketplace and get fair market value for the excess that you're willing to trade and barter with. And also these masters were supposed to take care of their servants. And many times before this, when a person was a slave, if you got sick and died, that's on you. If you got cut, that's on you. And you could be beaten, you had no rights. When we see Exodus 21 and we glean through some of the Psalms that we've been reading, we see where God is the God of the fatherless. God is the God of the poor. God looks at how we treat one another and holds the powerful accountable. So this is not in some atheistic, deistic society where God's not paying attention. He's going to be over this. He's going to hold the powerful responsible for how they treat those that don't have power and those that are in their tutelage. We're going to see a word coming up here, betrothing. When we're dealing with women here, it gets pulled out of context to say, oh, see, women are treated a second. You can buy and sell women. Oh, how horrible. No. We're talking about how that if you have servants in your household, many of the women can be betrothed. Betrothed is not just to me, figuratively speaking, if I was the leader of the household, but I am betrothed to take care of her as a daughter. See, betrothal does not always mean to marry. It means to care for. So we get the idea of a female to care for, and maybe I will encourage her or see if one of my sons want to marry her or not in a forced arranged marriage. Because that is not allowed, of course, in the scriptures, that someone would force or arrange. Ruth had a say. I'm going a little bit ahead, and I know I said I wouldn't too much. She had a say. She came to Boaz. Boaz and her know they wanted this relationship to go on. Boaz just didn't go and say, Ruth's cool, I'm going to go buy her. Now come with me, woman, and grab her by the hair. You'll see just the opposite. You know, the women had choices up to now. Rebecca did not have to go with Eleazar. You know, you get the idea that Leah and Rachel, until they got married, it was open. Rachel could have said, you know what, you're with Leah, I'm out. She could have done that. So we see that there is a reciprocity going on between the genders. But if this man wants to, he can stay there. And you got the idea of this man goes out, if he takes his wife and children, he has no security. He has no economy. He has no job. There's no way to protect them if they're out by themselves. The wife and children are safer staying with the master, staying in this household. And if he wants to, if the servant wants to say, I love my master, and I don't want to set free, they'll go and see the judges, and they'll pierce his ear, and he'll belong to that man forever. But when we say belonging, voluntary servitude. Paul calls himself a bondservant of Christ. I volunteer for servitude. We Christians are really not free in the sense that we think we're free to do whatever we want. We are bound by our love for Christ and our love for the Bible. The Bible in the New Testament says the love of God constrains me. It should constrain us. We are not to be licentious. We're not to just meet every need and go after every want, but we're to seek them through the Lord and seek them along His way. We're to be His servants. And so if a man sell his daughter, oh, you're selling your daughter. Well, when my daughter wanted a job, she went and sold herself, if you will, to a burger place to flip burgers and make money. Because that's what you do when you go to a job. You wear your nice clothes, your nice tie or whatever, you bring your resume, and you're selling yourself. Same kind of concept. You're not selling her, dragging her, kicking and screaming. To be a maidservant, she shall be. The women and men servants were treated differently. There was a respect here for the position of a woman who is the weaker vessel in this economy. She was not to be treated like cattle. She was not to be treated. She was treated differently. That you were supposed to, you're betrothing her, and if you betroth her to her son, you need to keep your word. But if you're not going to, she remains as a daughter. Now listen to that. This is almost an adoption, if you will. This idea of betrothal. I know that's where a man adopts a wife. You know, when you go get a wife, you connect with the wife. You're going to care for her and meet her needs. She's coming into your life. A woman comes into a man's life. A man doesn't come into the woman's life. A man is supposed to set up the house, but she creates the home. The man is supposed to provide and secure. She's supposed to grow and nurture. We have our places. Here, we're talking about this man here is to, if he betroths her to himself, that's good. But if she doesn't want to, he is supposed to set her free. And if he takes another daughter, then he is supposed to take care of her. But if not, then she shall go free without money. If she wants to go, she can go. So again, there is that basic human freedom here that it talks about. We're talking about murder. If you strive with a man and all the different things that happen, if you're fighting with one another, we get implications of purposeful manslaughter or accidental manslaughter, you know, where somebody was killed by accident. Here, someone's killed on purpose. If a man does this, if they strive with one another, then we go into if you hurt a woman with child, then we mentioned the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. We're setting up boundaries of justice, of recompense. If an animal kills a man, this will happen to the animal. And the man bears the loss. In certain situations, if the man that owned the animal didn't know the animal was wild, there's one set of circumstances. If he did and did nothing about it, which is supposed to be responsibility, there are another. So we have all of these laws. They're creating relationships, they're creating property. These people never owned anything. Now that they're going to have property, now that they're going to have power, they need to use it correctly within this economy of God. So God's stating it out very clearly. If a man opens a pit, he's trying to catch an animal and another person falls in it, he's going to bear the problem. It's going to be his fault. Again, we're holding people accountable for their actions. If you're going to be free, there's accountability. When you were slaves, maybe there was no accountability. Things happened to you, nobody cared. If we care about human life, there has to be responsibility and accountability. We have to have decent laws. In 23, I love it. It just goes on talking about property. These people are going to be owning property for the first time. I mean, they own it. This isn't something that, you know, the master lets you have, but it's his, not yours. This is something that you get to do, but it's not yours. You just handle the axe. Now this is your axe. You just get to handle the cart, but now it's your cart. Now, there's a sense of property here, but what is your property? What is someone else's? What if somebody steals from you? These different things. This is why you have the bear false witness in the Ten Commandments, because two people could lie and steal from a third party by agreeing to tell a lie. We are supposed to tell the truth because God is watching and wants us to tell the truth situation, so we don't gang up, witch hunt people. He talks about all kinds of restitution. If you borrow something and somebody else, it happened to you, well, if you were in the area, it was part of the hire. If you weren't in the area, then they owe you. There's stipulations of justice going on. You're talking about if a man entices a maid, if you seduce a woman, here's what you need to do. You don't just get away with it. You are making her your wife. And we're not forcing. This is not the rape a woman, drag her away thing. You get the idea that the enticement was the two of them agreeing. The word entice here. Later on, rape is mentioned, and it's dealt with in a totally different way. There are means where women are enticed by men, and they know what they're doing. They volunteer for it. Then he shall, she is a valuable person. You're not getting something for free. She is a value. You need to make sure that the people, if you're having sex with somebody, that's somebody that you want to bring into your life. God is not a God of adultery. He is a God of justice, and he's a God of putting a man and a woman together. The two shall become one flesh, again, going into the New Testament. It talks about not allowing a witch to live. You'll have no witches there. It talks about not sleeping with animals. Many of the things that he's mentioning were A, happening in Egypt, or B, would be happening in the land of Canaan. God saw these things happening. They saw these things happening. Secular history kind of records in the shadows some pretty horrible sexual things that were happening all over the planet. And many of these were just sexual free-for-alls. And here they're making certain delineations of what you will not allow. If you're sacrificing to any other god, he shall be utterly destroyed. We'll have no more gods, just the one God. If you afflict the widow or the fatherless child, once again, God taking care of the fatherless, the powerless. We also see that he says, I will hear their cry. If they cry out to me, I will hear their cry. If you lend money, you're not to lend with usury. That is a very strong sense of, interest payments. You've really jacked up the interest for them. No, having a proper amount of interest is good business. If you're going to borrow money, payback must plus a little more. Depends on the situation, but you're not to extort from the poor who are trying to learn from you, trying to get from you. It talks about taking things as a pledge. People will say, well, I'll give you my garment and you give me this money, and when I pay back the money, I get my garment back, almost like a pawn shop kind of thing. Give the poor man his garment back, and then you're holding it as a pledge only during the day. Do not revile the gods or the rulers. Let God take care of that. Don't curse anyone's rulers, either your ruler or the rulers of other nations. And he says, and ye shall be holy men unto me. The goal of this economy, of this action, is to be holy men in the eyes of God. So we need to look at this and not say, well, looking at just from our 21st century lens and say good, bad. Or some will flip it and say, well, God said it's okay to do this because here's the way he allowed it. Many times, like I said, in a cultural situation, the values and the character stays the same. The implementation might vary a little bit based upon as they grow, as they become a culture, as they become a kingdom, as they have a king, as they move up and deal with other nations. There's important things that go on. So we have to be very careful. Again, in an evidentiary point of view, only see what's here. Be careful what you extrapolate. Be careful what conclusions you make. Be careful what implications you put on it that are not in the scripture. But from time to time, you'll come across something that at that time seems impalatable to us. But we live in a different world. So see what's there. Be guided by what's there. Thank you.